So I shall start with the proceedings.
Okay.
Good evening, all. I welcome today's speaker, Mr. Dinesh Dwivedi, sir, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India. I also welcome all the participants from legal fraternity, students, and professors join us in today's webinar from different parts of India. I also welcome our participants from USA, Philippines, Indonesia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Bhutan. In this ninth webinar organized by Vigilo Associates, we also happy to inform you that Civil Education Institute has been contacted us to join hand with this webinar series. Some of are there in today's webinar also. After this session, we have a question answer session will also be there. Participants are also invited and feel to cite their question in chat box only. Today's topic is migrant worker, tyranny of elected. Migrant worker who depend upon their daily wages are living unprecedented situation due to sudden lockdown. Sadly, these workers are fighting hard to survive with no earning left. They are and their families have been starving due to scary situation. They left cities to reach their native home places, and even when our government enforced curfew and for which they are facing FIRs, they are most vulnerable situation after lockdown. Has our government thought about this plight of this migrant worker before or after imposing lockdown? If yes, then what is the need to take suo motu action by the Honorable Supreme Court in this migrant worker issue? To discuss today's topic, we have with us Dinesh Dwivedi, sir, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India. I wish to give a introduction of Dinesh Dwivedi, sir. Dinesh Dwivedi, sir, enrolled as an advocate in 1978 and started his practice in Allahabad High Court. Further shifted to his practice to Supreme Court of India. Sir has 40 years of experience as a lawyer, and his expertise in constitution matters, service matters, civil matters, and education matters. He has appeared many popular cases as reservation and promotion matter of state of Karnataka and Uttarakhand MLA disqualification matter. Dinesh Dwivedi sir is also known for his fearless approach and always raise his voice against social injustice. It is our privilege to have with us Dinesh Dwivedi sir. I welcome you, sir, and over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, friends. I think we are meeting after a month when the ongoing crisis of migrants was fully raging. But today it has calmed down a little as a result of the intervention of the Supreme Court. The topic which we have chosen is principally tyranny of the executive. Of course, the migrant issue is there because it is the migrants who had to bear the tyranny. The topic, interestingly, you would notice, bears a resemblance to an old phrase called tyranny of the unelected. I'll come to that a little later. But a brief facts would be necessary in this case. In the last webinar, I had elaborated on who are the migrants, why do they migrate, which is principally in search of employment and living opportunities. The declaration of a lockdown without any prior notice to them. The shutters were down with regard to the industries. The transport was stalled so that no one could move. The migrants were left in the lurch. And these are the migrants who do not have very deep pockets because it is well known that they don't have resources which may last them beyond a week or 10 days. But nevertheless, they were blocked, they couldn't move. Now, as a consequence of this, what we saw was the terrible indignities heaped on them. They had to move on the roads day and night without food and water. And in fact, on the roads, they were also given beating. Now, the fact that becomes evident is that this was terrible indignity heaped on the migrants. Now, it was in this situation that some of us in the civil society who chose to kind of invoke the jurisdiction of Supreme Court under Article 32, so that some kind of succor could be provided to them, some provisioning for food, etc., could be made, and if possible, some transport arrangements could be made for them so that they may reach the safety and security of their homes, which they were desiring. Now, surely, whoever saw this spectacle, nearly 2-month-long spectacle, would realize that the governments, both center and the state, were more or less absent. Where were they? I don't know. But it is certain that they completely ignored the migrants. And if you recall, in the last webinar, I had indicated that these are the nowhere invisible people who resided all along amongst us, but were not noticeable at all for various reasons I've stated in my last webinar. So when some members of the civil society, including me also, we moved Supreme Court, and Supreme Court in its wisdom entertained the petition and passed an interim order. If you see the first order, there is an underlying assumption there that the provisioning by the central and the state governments was extremely inadequate. It was not a case where center and states were kind of providing relief extensively. It was a case where they were non-visible, and therefore even the judge must have noticed this fact for the last 2 months, that the provisioning wasn't there. People were dying on the roads. People were suffering hunger, thirst, and walking on foot in the heat and under the darkness of the night. Now, in such a situation, when the Supreme Court, in its first order, records this finding, based on what it had observed, it did not need any kind of evidence or witness to establish this before the court. It was so self-evident. People were on the move on the roads and highways. Now, why would Supreme Court, this is the question which one has to ask. Why would Supreme Court intervene in these matters? Normally, these are matters in the executive field, the government's jurisdiction. But why would Supreme Court intervene? If the governments are ignoring this catastrophe, if the governments are intervening absolutely inadequately, and people continue to suffer, then what is the option before the Supreme Court but to intervene and issue appropriate directions? Now, if you see the directions only go to the extent of coordinating the efforts of center and state and clarifying where there was a clear dispute between center and state as to who is responsible for providing relief to the migrants, who is responsible for transporting them. It is here that the Supreme Court intervened and compelled the governments to provide for transport of migrants to their homes, for food and shelter and other facilities. Now, this was not a kind of overreaching of jurisdiction. However, to my dismay, I found the two eminent jurists intervened in the matter and tersely criticized the Supreme Court for passing an order granting interim relief. Now, if you read those criticisms, I do not want to bring in the names specifically, then it will be apparent that there was this resonance of the old statement called tyranny of the unelected. Tyranny of the unelected was a phrase coined by Shri Arun Jaitley in the year 2016 when Supreme Court had struck down the NGAC Act, kind of taking over the power of the Supreme Court, of the Collegium of the Supreme Court, to appoint judges, transfer judges, etc. The tyranny of the unelected meant, which they assumed also, that the judges are appointed, not elected, while the legislature and the executive government is the elected. They are responsible, the government is responsible to the legislature. The legislature has to seek approval and social audit from the voters periodically, and therefore they are directly responsible to the people. And therefore they rightly have the power and resources as well as knowledge to deal with the issue. In other words, what this implies is that we know the best, or the government knows the best, the courts should not intervene. The government understands its people, their needs and their difficulties, and the court should not intervene. It further implies that whatever government does is adequate, enough, and nothing more is needed. That is the underlying assumption of this state, their state. Now, coming back to this phrase, tyranny of the unelected, that was coined by the then Law Minister, Shri Arun Jaitley, in 2016, which implied that they are the people responsible to they are the politicians who are responsible to the legislature, and the legislature is directly responsible to the people. Therefore, they should be given the freedom to deal with the issues of the people. No doubt this is an issue of the people. The interesting part is that the tyranny of the unelected, as coined by Sri Jaitley, is a multi-dimensional factor. On the one hand, it reflects the elected executive and the legislature, while on the other hand, it perhaps says that the judiciary is not elected and therefore not responsible to the people. The second aspect of it is that the tyranny of the unelected has the reverse side. It has a deep nexus with the concept that we have evolved, tyranny of the elected. the tyranny of the unelected, or the tyranny of the elected is inversely proportional to the tyranny of the unelected. That's the nexus between the two, you must remember. The tyranny of the unelected is inversely correlated to the tyranny of the elected. Now, here was a case, what we saw was clearly and glaringly tyranny of the elected. And therefore, there was need for the court to intervene, which was termed as tyranny of the unelected. Now, the fact is that I was a little bewildered by their observation and their timing. The words used were that the judges are appointed and not elected. As I said, it certainly resounds of the earlier statement of Sri Jaitley. And therefore, this question does arise. Why did they have to come down with this criticism at this juncture? It is not that they did not notice the misery of the migrants. It was there at large on all the media screens throughout the country, day after day. But the fact remains, the only answer that I can give for this intervention of the critics, the two jurists, is that they came in support of the government at this juncture to tell us precisely that government being elected knows the people and their miseries, and therefore it should be given full freedom to do whatever it wants to. If it partially deals with the misery of the migrants, then so be it. That is all, and adequate. It must be assumed to be adequate. But then my objection to these statements are that the very concept of tyranny of the unelected is based on the principle that we have a democracy based on the Westminster model. Undoubtedly, we do have that. But then there is a big difference. The Westminster model, which we have copied in our constitution, is from the British Constitution, as we all know. And there they do not have a written constitution. Therefore, the parliamentary supremacy is absolute. The courts are there principally for the purposes of law enforcement, primarily. But unlike the British Constitution, we have a written constitution which defines the powers in a definitive manner of all the institutions under the Constitution. It prescribes separation of power after describing the boundaries of the three institutions under our Constitution: the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature. Then our Constitution further incorporates Bill of Guarantees, Part 3. It further proclaims itself to be a welfare constitution. And therefore, Part 3 and Part 4 have to be read together. They have to be balanced. Even Part 3 has certain rights which perhaps do indicate the welfare concept. Now, if there is a Bill of Rights, and if there is a breach of rights, Then our constitution further went to the extent of prescribing modes of kind of supporting and safeguarding the rights and enforcing the rights. If one would notice the constitution, it perhaps firewalls the Bill of Rights on both the ends. To use the latest technical terminology, firewalling. In the beginning, there is Article 13, which says legislature and the executive cannot do anything which breaches fundamental rights. And if they do, the law enforcer is there. And in the end, Article 32 is placed, which floods the other side and requires the Supreme Court to uphold the Constitution and the guarantee of rights. There is another interesting factor which I may bring to your notice. If you go through the 6th schedule, which comprises of oaths of the various constitutional functionaries, including President, Vice President, Prime Minister, the ministers, MPs, etc. There is one peculiarity in the oath of a Supreme Court judge and the High Court judge. Unlike the other oaths, the oath of a judge clearly requires the judge to take an oath to uphold the Constitution. It's not there in any other oath. They will abide by the Constitution and the law, not upholding the Constitution. Upholding of the Constitution is the power given to the Supreme Court and the High Courts. It is for this reason the Supreme Court has been given the role of a guardian of the Constitution and, as some call it, sentinel on the keyway so far as the fundamental rights are concerned. Now, I would pick 3 particular rights out of large number of fundamental rights which have the welfare concept. Take, for instance, Article 14, coordinate it with Article 19, and then see it along with Article 21. Now, these 3 articles have been subject matter of various interpretations repeatedly since 1969. And 2 principles are settled more than any. Two, if you read 14, 19, and 21 together, what emerges from that is that people do have this guarantee of life, which is not mere life, but little more than that. It includes life as the humans live, life of dignity, life which takes care of food, water, and shelter. That's the concept of life when we read along with 14 and 19. That's the reasonableness of it. And therefore, when the misery strikes and the government does not adequately respond, what is to be done? And therefore, the civil society rightly intervened to nudge the Supreme Court to pass an order requiring the governments to take appropriate action in the matter of food, shelter, and transport, which are primary needs at that time. I would therefore say, if this is the true position, then the intervention of the 2 eminent jurists who had adorned this court too was absolutely uncalled for And it obviously was meant to pressurize the courts not to intervene. Because admittedly, they had come out in support of the government. Any intervention of the Supreme Court would obviously be based on the underlying factor that the response of the government has been either one of ignoring it or extremely inadequate, and therefore people are suffering. Now, this is a direct kind of a charge on the government, if one would see it impliedly. It is this they were objecting to. Now, as I have indicated to you, Supreme Court indicated when it did and why it did. It did as a guardian of the fundamental rights and the Constitution. And it found that there was clearly a breach of Article 14, 19, and 21. Let me put it another way. Supposing the government declares a famine in a particular area or in the whole country or a state. And if we see every day that the people are not being provided food, shelter, or perhaps other facilities that may help them in surviving, then what is the option left for Supreme Court? Except to intervene to safeguard the liberty contained in Article 21, to enable the citizens of India to live as humans with dignity, to die of hunger, or even to survive without food for a long period of time is an absolutely undignified kind of a misery heaped on the people. And this is what we were noticing. Now, I can accept the fact that there can be a valid objection when Supreme Court tries to intervene in matters of policy. For instance, let's take a concrete case relating to this episode. The corona had struck, and the government, in its wisdom, thought that the best way to deal with corona would be to declare a complete lockdown, a severe containment strategy. And it did not end here. Complete lockdown and shutting down of industries, place of work, shutting down of people to where they were. The migrants were told not to move, to remain where they were. But how long could they survive? The lockdown was declared for 3 weeks. And then there was a likelihood of extension for another 2 weeks. And these migrants who do not have the capacity or capability to survive for more than a week or 10 days, they couldn't have possibly survived for that long. And therefore took to roads and whatever means available. Now, I can appreciate this argument that Supreme Court cannot intervene. Can you see me? Hello?
So your video has been gone. I think from your side it has been stopped.
Video?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I think
Video is not there. And that's the executive prerogative. They are the best judge. There's no doubt about it. And they can declare it. No one can dispute that. How severe is to be the lockout? It is their prerogative. Courts cannot intervene. Because neither do they have the information nor expertise to judge this. But having declared the lockdown in all its severity, having stalled the migrants, then it was obligatory requirement for the center and the states to provide for food and shelter as well as other facilities and including means of survival to the migrants, including those who had taken to roads. That is where the courts can intervene, because lockdown by itself does not result in arbitrariness. It is the non-provisioning of essentials, the food, etc., that results in arbitrariness. And any arbitrariness is antithetic to our constitutional scheme. And if Article 21 and 14 are there, then any lockdown where there is total absence of provisioning for food, water, and means of livelihood or survival, the transport, then perhaps there is there's no possibility of Supreme Court constitutionally not intervening in the matter. As I said, Supreme Court has to uphold the Constitution. So it is in the light of this important factor that we have to see the intervention of the Supreme Court. And this intervention of the Supreme Court is definitely for the welfare of the people. It did subserve, as we all know, an important purpose, because the transport facilities, etc., were provided to the migrants who were on the roads, who were not being taken care of, and large number of them were reached to their homes. And therefore, I would say that the two jurists who called out this phrase, tyranny of the unelected, and relied upon it to criticize the Supreme Court, should have a rethink. They were not right in correct constitution. And this is how the two dimensions have to be understood. The tyranny of the unelected is always inversely proportional to tyranny of the elected. And that is what has happened. Now, tyranny of the unelected is certainly not a fair comment. But tyranny of the elected can always be a fair comment, because that invites and invokes interference. That's how I would like to put it, the tyranny of the elected. There is any question which one would like to pose, I am willing to answer them then. Nudging the governments, of course, backing up with the contempt power, nudging the government to go to the people and serve them. That is all they can do, nothing more than that. In the absence of any precise definition of enough, one cannot possibly predict what is enough.
Yes, sir. Sir, there is one more question.
I can see.
Yes, sir. So there's too many questions has been coming. Sir, one of the participants.
I've seen that, the second question. The proper remedies, as I said, are Article 32 and 226 in the High Court. These are the two remedies or the guarantees that we have for the enforcement of our guaranteed rights. As I said, firewalling the other side with a specific guarantee of enforcement. So there are only two remedies. Of course, there can always be a remedy of suit. Suit remedy is always there, but then that would be too cumbersome and too dilatory. So 226 and the Article 32. What's next?
So there is a question that what can be the proper remedies for the problems faced by the migrants worker according to you?
I have explained that. Article 32 and 226. What can be proper remedies under the Constitution? So it's Article 32 and 226. I mean, there is an overall remedy of suit, but that is far too dilatory. I won't go for it.
Okay, next question is there is a way for the Supreme Court to make state government more accountable to the migrant workers?
I guess we are living in a civilized society. And we must realize that the three organs of government have to function cohesively. And this is a crisis which requires cohesive approach. A Supreme Court, it would be far better for Supreme Court to toe a softer line and nudge the government to act as it must. But then going beyond that would only be possible if Supreme Court comes to know, or it is brought to the notice of Supreme Court that its orders are not being complied with, then it can perhaps utilize its powers, contempt and otherwise. But this is not a sphere of activity where I would suggest that the court should take a very stringent view. It should be more accommodating. But keep on pushing, as the Supreme Court is rightly doing. It is not putting end to the matter, but pushing it, so that the migrants are properly given relief.
So there is a question that when the migrant workers are dying on the street and are hungry, why don't Supreme Court come heavy on the government to ensure the proper financial relief for these persons, for these migrant workers?
See, we must remember that the running of the government is not Supreme Court's responsibility under the Constitution. It's not its jurisdiction. What is the relief to be provided, to whom it is to be provided, how much to be provided is primarily for the government to decide. Now, Supreme Court doesn't have the expertise, nor does it have the material available to come to a conclusion that no, this relief given up till now is inadequate or adequate, or something more is needed to be done. The present case, the intervention is because there was total absence of presence of governments. So they were either ignoring the responsibility, or what Supreme Court had noticed was bickering amongst themselves as to who is responsible for dealing with the migrants and their problems. So that was the situation. Supreme Court had to intervene. Plus, what Supreme Court also noticed was that they were not ready to pay for the migrants' fare, which was unfair. When the lockdown has been declared by the government, then the government should pay. And therefore, the direction that pay for the migrants' fare, which is determinate. So anything that is determinate can be given. But anything that is not determinate, Supreme Court would find it difficult to adjudicate. But let's not believe in the fact that Supreme Court can solve all the problems. It cannot. It doesn't have that kind of authority, the knowledge, and the feedback. So it can't. It can only push the government in a particular direction where something meaningful is done for the people. And that should be the real attitude.
So there is a question. What may be the government initiation for migrant worker after COVID-19? Don't you think there is a need of new policy regarding this?
My friend, I think we are going far, far beyond the topic of discussion. So far as the policy is concerned, it requires so many inputs, myriads of inputs. I would not be able to offhand say anything about it, excepting while making wild guesses. That's all. So let's not go into that issue. That would not be, I think, very appropriate. So I would rather desist from going into that.
So there is one more question that having regard to socio-economic condition, uh, such a huge migrant population and the emergency of COVID-19, doesn't you think that there is need of new policies? This we have discussed. I think it has been, yes. Was it possible for the government to control such issue, reaching out and reach to every migrant? So basically, the number of a migrant is too high. So
I'll like to answer this because this is an interesting one. Let's start from the beginning. When the lockdown was declared, in my opinion, the sudden declaration of lockdown is the evil that really caused the whole havoc. Now, if the lockdown would have been more deliberate, prior notices would have been given to the migrants, then perhaps they would have traveled back themselves on their own after paying their own railway and bus fares to their homes. Now, there was really no point in declaring lockdown all of a sudden. Now, sudden declaration of lockdown indicates to me that government didn't have any kind of a plan of action. And this was a panic response. And therefore, within 4 hours, you declare a lockdown, leaving all the migrants stranded. There are about 10 to 12 crore migrants who were left absolutely stranded. Now, the question is, this wasn't a state secret. This wasn't a defense secret where you could have hid it or you were reluctant to disclose it. I mean, the migrants should have been told a week before declaration that please go back if you want to. They would have gone back, most of them. But that was not done. That was the primary evil that was done. That was the primary, mistake. A grand mistake, I would say. It should not have been. Now, by doing that, they would have really solved a huge problem of migrants. Maybe most of the migrants who were seen on the roads may not have been there. They might have been in the comfort zone of their own houses. But yet, sudden declaration resulted in all that problem and magnified the problem manyfold. Now, the other thing which I would like to emphasize, and I would like you all to think over it, that these migrants are poor people. They can't continue without work for a long time. Now, if they can't continue for a long time, they can't survive for a long time, then something should be done to pay them off. Put some money in their pockets so that they can survive respectfully in a dignified manner. That can be done in various ways. For instance, every village has this scheme, the Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, which is a huge scheme which could be utilized for paying to the workmen. Because those workmen are enrolled there. So they can be paid as they had been paid earlier while working. Now, there are other similar schemes like PF accounts, bank accounts, and so on and so forth. Government can, if it wants to, it can find out the details and try to reach as many as possible. Now, I can understand the difficulty. There are about, the rough estimate of the economist is there are about 400 million daily wagers and such workers who are poor, including the migrants. Now, for them, this would have been a boon. Give them money to survive and then let them be happy surviving in a dignified manner. I suppose that's the very fair way of looking at it. Money should be given, put in their pockets, in their accounts. So they are certainly finding it very difficult. And it does not behove any developing or any kind of nation which has a sense of a feeling of grandness or desire to become grand to let 400 million people survive on an absolutely minimum meager allowances or salaries, or perhaps it doesn't behove a nation. Something should be done, therefore, in that regard. It doesn't behove our nation to let people die of hunger, let people walk on the roads. The whole world would have seen us. Whole world was watching these migrants walking on the roads day and night. I mean, what impression did we give to the world? So I think if a couple of things were done in a right manner, then all this may not have happened. And the first was a real blunder. I mean, not to pre-inform them before declaring a lockout was a blunder.
Yes.
That is what I can say. I'm not an economist, so I can't possibly.
Sir, recently I also came to one of the very biggest problems, sir. So when we are talking about that money should be given into the bank accounts of the person, the migrant people or poor peoples. Sir, recently I come to know that the government has talking about the electronic transactions, and so many bank accounts in the Jan Dhan Yojana
There were
account
two.
was opened. Yes, sir. But that people who has opened their account in that particular scheme, they doesn't have the ATM cards. They forced to go to a lines in the bank in this pandemic situation to withdraw 500 rupees. And this is I think this is a blunder. This government is creating a blunder with this kind of thing. They should have provided a ATM card so they can withdraw the amount somewhere else. The long line has been there in banks.
See, my answer is that you do have a point. My answer to you is this, that COVID situation is there, it is not going to go early. It is there to stay for some time. So put the amount of money in the Jan Dhan accounts. That is one thing which could have been done. And then it could have been arranged in a logical manner as to how many people can go and collect their money in a day or what distance is to be maintained. So this is the kind of trade-off that we have to have if we want people to survive, and of course, if we want to preserve the people from the COVID scene. So I think all this was manageable if someone would have thought of it from before. As I said, the sudden declaration clearly demonstrates that there was no plan of action. All of a sudden it came and caused havoc.
Definitely, sir. So we have a question of one of our participants from Philippines.
Okay.
She is asking that there is a cyclone in Bengal. She may came to know about this thing on CNN channel, and she is asking that is the government or Supreme Court had passing a specific relief for the people who is affected from the pandemic and the cyclone.
No, it's not for the cyclone. It's only for the people who are migrants on the roads and not beyond that. The other thing has not been touched by Supreme Court. It was only the migrant issue and neither the cyclone issue.
Although the government has been giving certain amount to them, those who are affected from the cyclone, but we have read in newspapers and news agencies. So it should be maybe there.
So that is for the government to decide. If government gives
Yes,
there, then government should give here also.
Yes, sir.
That's the point which you're making. I agree. I accept. But then, of course, this is for the governance of the country. No?
Yes, sir. There is a big lapse on the part of the government, sir. But we have seen on this pandemic situation, sir. There are so many questions, sir. We have a time, so we'll take 2, 3 more questions.
Go ahead. I don't mind. No, but I would suggest let people ask questions relevant and pertaining to the issue. When the questions which I am noticing are far beyond, and I am not an expert on those things.
Sir. We have seen too many questions on we have beyond today's topic. So I just requested all the participants to ask the question relating to today's topic only, because otherwise it will be create difficult for us to the question, sir. So there is a question, one of our participants, that after the lockdown 5, states like Maharashtra and Delhi are showing an urgent need of migrant worker. For the labor laws, those state doesn't favor working environment. Can Supreme Court intervene this? Sir, this is a matter. Basically, sir, I think this participant is talking about some state has been diluting the labor laws, basically.
Right.
And some action has been taken by the director. Some petition has been filed, some person in Supreme Court, I think, but I have remember in that regard.
Yeah, there is a petition which has been filed, but the problem is that little that I know of, this labor matters, these are generally in the concurrent schedule. So both center and the states have the power. Now, state can regulate labor provided it does not contravene any central law. Now, as I am aware, most of the labor fields are covered by the central laws. Therefore, state cannot lay down anything which is in contravention of those laws until and unless center approves. So prior approval of the center will have to be there, and center doesn't seem to be approving at the moment. So I don't see any fear of that. But then it is not very fair to, under the garb of COVID, to do all this. All this requires proper examination, proper discussion, and proper people's participation before all this should be done. That is my viewpoint.
Yes. So there are so many questions. It is difficult to choose because some of the question are not with this topic or this topic with the topic. So I just find out, sir. So one of our participants, she's a professor. She's asking that what is your opinion in this COVID-19? The violation of human rights has been taken place. So there is no such kind of directions or some prevention has been or some direction has been come from the court, Supreme Court or High Courts. So what do you think about this? Is it possible?
I'll answer this. The human right violation has to be kind of put into some kind of a definite form, constitutional form. A Supreme Court can only entertain petitions in regard to human rights, provided we can set it within the periphery of any fundamental right. I had pointed out there are three fundamental rights, Article 14, 19, and 21, amongst others, which have to be read cohesively. And they contain the plethora of human rights: right to food, right to shelter, right to education, right to human living, and so on and so forth, dignified living, the human dignity. All these are concepts embedded in these three articles. Now, if these three articles are breached, then obviously we have a right to move the Supreme Court or the High Court under Article 32 or under Article 226. This is precisely the point which I had made, that the interference by Supreme Court in its order is for this very reason. And therefore, what did they do? They provided for the transport of migrants so that they could reach the comfort of their houses, which was the most important necessity and a human right. Two, that they should be provided food and shelter on the way, and thereafter they should be transported honorably. So that was only human right being sponsored by Supreme Court. What else was it? Person dying of hunger or thirst needs food and water, and that was what was provided for, and that is what is subserving human rights.
The Honorable Supreme Court has given a specific direction in this regard to save the.
If you see the first order, if my friends would see the first order, that first order impliedly admits that the response of the government does not appear to be adequate at all. It admits that the migrants are suffering and therefore something needs to be done. And that is why this strong reaction of tyranny of the unelected, because it casts a shadow on the government.
Yes. So there is a question that in respect of the incident of a death taken place in train during this the travel of the pandemic situation, one of the participants asking a specific question that why not the Supreme Court cited this incidents because one life has been gone, so it should be a concern.
It is, and we should know why these people were on the tracks. And I'm sure you must be knowing it. When the lockdown was declared and the migrants started taking the road route, the highway route, then the police came down heavily, beating them. To avoid that beating, to avoid that ignominy, people started moving along the railway lines and got killed. Now you can imagine the horror, I mean, of so many lives lost because of all this. But what I want to say is that merely mentioning this in order, or mentioning that large number of people had died while on the roads, would hardly matter, would hardly make any difference. The effective part was that something had to be done to provide transport facility primarily to them, and food and water and other provisions so that they may reach their homes safely. That was the primary human right need.
There is more questions, but I think it is appropriate that we can will revert them with the on a mail itself, because it will take a long time because there are so many questions.
Most of them I'm seeing are more of a statement made. I mean, statements made.
Yes.
They're not in the form of questions even. Anyway, I'm not competent to answer all those questions.
Definitely, sir. But whatever this, if it is relating to our topic, definitely we'll answer the questions. Sir, I really thank to you that you have given us so much time and from your busy schedule, sir. So I am also thankful to all the participants who is coming.
Let me clarify. The schedule is least busy these days. So the honor is all mine.
Sir, our pleasure, sir. Sir, thank you once again for this inciting session, and thank you all the participants for posting your queries. You can see this recorded version of this video, this webinar, on our our social media platform like YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Just go and subscribe the page. It is for the past and future recordings. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Be safe and healthy. Thank you, sir.